This is the Untamed Ethos podcast. Join us as investment pros, executives, and other experts talk business, personal growth, investing, politics, and the trending topics well-rounded pros need to know about. Authentic, unfiltered, and fun. Joshua Wilson is the founder of United Ethos Wealth Partners, a registered investment advisor. Due to industry regulations, he will not discuss any of United Ethos's investment advice on this podcast, and nothing you'll hear on this podcast should be taken as investment advice. All opinions expressed by Joshua and by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of United Ethos or its affiliates.
Welcome back to Untamed Ethos. I'm Joshua Wilson, and today with me is my friend Dr. Troy B. Jackson. Dr. Jackson is a political strategist, pastor, candidate for vice chair of the Texas Republican Party, husband and girl dad ×3. Dr. Jackson, welcome to Untamed Ethos.
Thank you for having me, Joshua. I'm so glad to be with you.
Wonderful. Well, Troy, I just got to start with the elephant in the room here for my listeners. You are running for vice chair of the Republican Party, and from what I understand, a lifelong Republican.
Yes.
But those of us who are listening and not watching the video, you're a black man.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And you know, it's real particular because growing up in my family, I was always taught that you don't make decisions based off of your emotions and feelings. You make informed decisions. So me becoming and being a Republican and standing with the Republican Party had nothing to do with emotions, had nothing to do with history or family history, which you hear from a lot of families. It totally had to do with the fact that I did my research. And growing up in a family with biblical values, I understood that I had to read the platform. And what is the platform? The platform is the foundation of each party. And so I read the platform of the Libertarian Party. I read the platform of the Green Party, the Conservative Party, the Republican Party, and the Democrat Party. And the reason why I didn't go with the Green, the Libertarian, or the Conservative Party is because they never have a candidate on the ballot, first and foremost, because they don't have the funding, they don't have the resources. They have some decent candidates, but they don't have the funding to have their own primaries to really be a formidable candidate when it comes to the general election cycles. So therefore, I ended up balancing between the Republican and Democrat Party. And there's this myth that there was a party switch. I couldn't find any switch. There was only one Democrat that I saw in history that switched over to become a Republican, and before he died a Democrat. But what I found is my Judeo-Christian values are rooted in the Republican Party. Does the Republican Party do everything I would like for them to do? No. However, I still stand with them because when it comes to the foundation of my values, they're represented in the Republican Party. I believe in limited government. The Democratic Party has always been about tax and spend. Mm-hmm. I can spend my own money. I don't need anyone to spend it for me. Or, you know, some men get married because they want a wife that will spend their money for them because they don't know how to spend it. That's not me. So from there, and then when I think about the touchy subject of abortion, you know, our God, Jesus, he's pro-life, and he's proven it over and over again by raising the dead and healing the sick and focusing on the family and making sure that people weren't being manipulated. And you know, and when he said, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. He didn't say I came that you might have death. He didn't come to create a culture of death. But when I see the Democrats saying you should be able to kill your babies at all stages and all ages, and what was it, Virginia, the governor of Virginia a few years ago tried to pass an infanticide law, meaning that after the baby was born, they said they would keep the child comfortable for 7 days, allowing the mother to decide if she wanted the baby or if the baby was an inconvenience to her. And if she determined that the baby was an inconvenience to her, they would kill the baby by severing the spinal cord, by putting shears in the neck of the baby and severing the spinal cord of the baby and saying that is abortion. That is not abortion, that is murder. The example that I give people, okay, so you don't believe in that. If you kill a woman that's pregnant, you get charged with double murder.
Yeah.
So how is it a fatty tissue when it's convenient to be a fatty tissue, a fatty cell, But when you want to make it murder or double murder, it becomes murder. You can't have it both ways. Follow the science is what they always say. So let's follow the science. Another big issue of mine on that side is I'm big on property ownership rights, property rights. I don't need anyone telling me what I can and cannot do with the property that I'm paying for. And in addition to the property rights, I believe that once we pay off our property, we should own our property. You should not be paying property taxes on something that you've already paid for. Mm-hmm. You've paid the taxes while you were paying the mortgage. Once you've paid your mortgage off, there should be no more taxes on that property. I'm for a universal tax where everyone, even the illegals that are flooding our border, that are coming into the U.S., even though I don't agree with them flooding our border the way they are, I do agree that everyone should pay an even tax. So if we have a what I call a consumption-based tax, now everyone is paying into the system. Right now, what most Americans don't know is that most Americans are not paying into the taxation system, period. There's no income tax. Because if you're making less than $20,000 a year, you don't pay any income tax. So you have all of these people saying, well, I'm being taxed. Are you really? Mm-hmm. Because if you're making under $20,000 a year, you're not being taxed at all. So it's I hear from the other side, well, everyone should pay their fair share. Well, let's start with a consumption-based tax where you're paying taxes on what you're purchasing.
Yeah. Troy, I believe in incentives and disincentives.
Yes.
I don't really believe in feelings matter to me, but I don't believe people ultimately act based on their principles. They more generally act according to the disincentives in front of them and the incentives in front of them.
Totally.
I'm offended by the term income tax.
Yes.
That term itself is offensive to me. I don't want to use that. I use the term productivity penalty because it's a disincentive.
I'm gonna borrow that.
Yeah, you can have it. My friend. You take that. You take that. I think that when you're putting a penalty on that income, well, that's disincentivizing the very thing that you want, which is productivity. The mindset essentially is a mindset of do you believe in creation? Do you believe in the ability to create wealth? And is wealth fixed or is wealth created? If you believe that wealth is created, then we want to maximize and incentivize the creation of wealth. Whereas there's a mindset that poverty is fixed, and so the only way for me to get more is to take from someone else. Someone is taking too much versus I can create my own wealth. What are the actions that I can do to create wealth? And one of those core actions is owning something, owning property, as you allude to. You mentioned that when you were talking about how your political philosophy, if you will, was morphing. And you said for a while you were balancing between Republican and Democrat. Maybe walk me through what you mean by balancing, and maybe even give some props to the Democrats on something that you think that they have right or something that maybe you wrestled with early on.
Definitely. So when I do the comparison, each party has what they call a party platform.
Yeah.
And what that party platform is, that is the foundational values of that particular party. And so as you read through the values, it's always in the language. Mm-hmm. And so where there can be a disconnect can be in people's comprehension. If you didn't come up under what's called a classic education, mm-hmm. your comprehension may be different than someone that grew up with a classic education.
Yes.
Because classic education causes you to read the words on the page and comprehend them as they're written. The modern day education causes you to read the words on a page and see something that's actually not there. So you're reading beyond the text. And so you're seeing something that's just not formidable for your life. And so now, as I'm looking at the party platforms, and each one, they have 10 party principles in the Republican Party. There is about 18 party principles in the Democratic Party. And a lot of the language sounds the same, But when you get into the fine line details inside the party platform and they start to explain how they plan to execute these particular things, it's totally different. And so that's where being able to really read and comprehend the words on the page comes into play, so that you have a real full understanding of what's at stake and what's really on the table. And so when I look at the Democratic Party, one of the things that plagued me, so I'm a pastor. Even before I was a pastor, I believed in God, and I'm a worshiper of God. I love Jesus. I study the Word. I study the Scriptures, and I study the Word for myself, not for others, not to preach or teach to others, but I study the Word of God to live. And so as I get into the party platform, one of the biggest things that I saw that what has been and is still perplexing to me, and in more recent time you can find it even more so. Before 1992, the Democratic Party platform mentioned God a lot. Mm-hmm. Not in the context that we would mention God, where we believe in the God and the God of all creation and things of that nature. But it was always in reference to utilizing God to promote an evil, which is not something that we would agree with. And so
give me an example.
So a great example, and you can find it in their party platform today. This is an example that they passed in 2008 during their national convention when Barack Obama was running for president. And so in the party platform, in their national platform, it literally states that they have the God-given right to abort children.
Okay.
That's that manipulative. So you mention God, but you don't mention God in the context of him being the God of creation, him being the God of that basically governs how you live your life. You don't mention God in the context of something that's biblical. Mm-hmm. If you get where I'm going with that. And so whereas when you look at the Republican Party platform, it mentions God 27 times in the Republican Party platform. The Democratic Party platform, which is still their platform from 2008 to today, and that's why I just want to cover more recent, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't really care about what was and what is. Yeah. Let's not deal with what was and what is. Let's deal with what is right now today. Today, in the Democratic Party platform, God is mentioned one time on page 26 in their platform. See, I've read the platform, so I know. Midway through the platform, it talks about your God-given right to abortion. That is the only time God is mentioned, period. Whereas in the Republican Party platform, God is mentioned 27 or 28 times.
Wow.
And all in different reference points that support biblical values. And one thing, as I went through the Republican Party platform, I was able to find scripture verses to tie to every single plank of the Republican Party platform. I could not find any biblical scriptures to tie to any planks of the Democratic Party platform. Nothing against them, but their language sounds great on the surface. But when I can't find scripture to back up what you're saying in your plank, it's not godly.
Okay, Troy. Well, you make a very convincing argument, but I got to say this is not what people are expecting, right?
No,
it's
not at all.
The African American church or black church, whatever term you want to use, whatever's preferred, I don't care. Is that I would imagine they're the most conservative part of the liberal or democratic side.
They are,
and all these things you're saying, why are they stuck with Democrats generally? I mean, it's considered pretty much an automatic. I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a demographic that is more likely to vote Democrat than the black community? I don't know. But and I think they also have the highest church attendance.
Yes.
of any demographic.
Yes, I agree. And so one of the things that I've learned in my studies and in my research and in my engagement is that it's not an ethnicity thing, it's a cultural thing. And it started back in the 1930s with the New Deal, with FDR's New Deal. FDR's New Deal set the course for everything that we see that's happening today. And so it conditioned the minds of people, not because of their ethnicity, but because of the level of class of people that they were. So you know how we have our middle class, you have your upper middle class, you have your wealthy, you have your rich, you have your poor. But so this is what happened. When FDR's New Deal came into play, it started to incentivize fatherless homes. Mm-hmm. It started to incentivize removing the male figure out of the home. What is the foundation of the family biblically? It's the father. Mm-hmm. The father is what holds everything in the house together. And so when you remove the father element, now people can identify with Father God because they don't have a reference point of what a father should be. If you haven't been fathered, all you know is you're angry because my father left and my father wasn't there. And so when you make the reference that, well, we have God as our father, now people reject God, which is why they booed God in the 2008 Democratic Convention. So you have a people that don't understand fatherhood. They don't understand fathership. And so I'm thankful that I've been able to be a vital part of my daughter's lives. Even when they rejected me, I still didn't reject them. Mm-hmm. And that's what I learned from the love of God. Mm-hmm. We may reject God, but he never rejects us. And that's very significant in our society. And as pastors, we have to make sure that people understand that although you turn your back on the Heavenly Father, he will never turn his back on you. Mm-hmm. And so what's happened culturally with these demographics over the years is they have no sense of direction because the sense of direction came from the Father. So now you're able to allow the government to come in and become the Father. What does the government do when they become the father? They come in and they take the place of everything that you've known to be true. Mm. And now you have a new truth that is not the truth. The truth, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through him. Mm-hmm. So now you have a culture of people of all ethnicities that have not been fathered. Fatherlessness is running rampant throughout the American Asian community, throughout the Anglo community, throughout the Black community, throughout the Hispanic community. And when you think about it, back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 40s, all of these communities were strong communities.
Yes.
Why were they strong? Because there was a man in the house. But when you take the man out of the house, and you put the government in the house in the place of the man, now the government can indoctrinate you to the fact that, well, we don't need men. What does our society say today? You can be whatever gender you want to be. There's infinite genders. It's your world, it's your thing. What has the Father always done all the way back from Abraham and the Abrahamic covenant? The Father has always named his children. What did he do? He proclaimed the destiny of their children through the name. Mm-hmm. Mothers were not naming children. That was the job of the Father. Because in the name, you didn't name them something because it sounded good. You named them something because the name that you gave your child proclaimed destiny of that child. And that child had something to walk into and something to step into that basically set the course or the track for where they were going spiritually and in the natural. And so now that you've had that shift, you move forward to the 1960s, civil rights and all of the civil rights things that were going. Nothing was wrong with those movements and those things. But one thing that happened was we became so focused on civil rights that we forgot about family. Mm-hmm. We forgot about raising a generation.
And what was the state of the family in the 60s?
There were more fathers in the home than there are today. We'll just go back to the Black community and the African American community. The Black community in America, 64% of the fathers were in the home. Today, 19% of the fathers are in the home.
In the civil rights era, so when I would imagine things are the worst.
Yes, there were more fathers in the home than there are today. when things are better, when there's more opportunity. See, we became more focused on getting a hand out or getting assistance than we did getting a hand up. A hand up is having opportunity at every turn. Me, as a black man, I would prefer to have opportunity than I would for you to give me anything. I have a lot of friends that are billionaires, good friends that are billionaires. And they always ask me, hey, what can I help you with? What you can help me with is what's in your head. I don't want you to write me a check because a check can run out. But if you allow me to sit down with you and take notes as you talk, and so I can get what's in your head. If I can get what's in your head, it's like that old saying that you used to hear. You feed me fish, I can eat for a day. But you teach me how to fish, I can eat for life. Same philosophy. And so we've got to get our people back on track. And when I say our people, I'm not just saying blacks or Anglo or whatever. I'm saying Americans. Because all Americans, we are, at the end of the day, we're all Americans.
Yeah.
And as I've traveled the globe, the one thing that's hated most are Americans. People here say, well, I'm hated because I'm black, and I'm hated because I'm this, and I'm hated because I'm Asian or whatever. The biggest hatred that I've seen in the world is toward Americans and Jews. It's the biggest hatred, even to this day. I go to Africa, I'm hated not because of the color of my skin, but because I came from America. Because they see the American dream as something that they don't have access to, which they don't, because most of these countries have dictators. They have this term that you hear all the time now. They have democracy forms of government.
Mob rule.
Mob rule, there you go. And people don't understand that America is not a democracy. That's why we're hated. We're a constitutional republic.
Yes.
Our founders took the best of every constitution and every republic and every democracy. They took the best pieces and put it together to formulate these United States of America. And this year we'll celebrate 248 years in existence. The longest constitutional republic in the history of the world. So we gotta be doing something right. Now the thing why I'm running for vice chair of the Republican Party of Texas is, and not chair, I don't believe I can get done some of the things that I'd like to get done. I want to unify us. I want to see us look beyond the I'm more conservative or you're less conservative. I want to unify us as a party. We talk about unity. Do people really understand what unity really is? I don't believe they do.
Well, I mean, clearly we didn't see that last week on the budget vote, right?
No, not at all. And the thing is, politics, which people say is a nasty word. It's not a nasty word to me. But politics means compromise, which means when you get into these roles, you have to already have a place that you've predetermined that this is where I'll compromise. I won't compromise beyond this. But the thing is, people get into these roles and they don't even have a place of compromise. When you got married, are you married?
No.
Okay, you're not married yet. Okay.
Not yet.
So when you do find that your bride, you're going to want to already have your place of compromise identified for your marriage. These are the areas that I'm willing to compromise in my marriage. In business, you have your areas that you're willing to compromise, and you have your areas that you're not willing to compromise on. So people need to take these practices all throughout their life and realize that when you have set in stone where I will compromise and where I won't, then you have a path to victory. Because the Bible is clear, without a vision, the people perish. Your vision has to include your place of compromise. I get tired of hearing people say, I will never compromise. If you will never compromise or never have a place of compromise, you will never succeed. And I learned that from one of my wealthiest friends in the world. He said, you know why I'm worth $20 billion? He said, he literally told me, he said, it's because I set my boundaries where I will compromise. And he said, even in my compromise, I have a written path to victory through my compromise. Because I'm playing the long game, whereas most Americans and most ethnicities, we play the short game. We're looking to see what how can I gratify myself today, tomorrow, next week? We're not thinking 5 years down the line like people thought in the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're not thinking 10 years down the line. When I was younger, first started dating, I'd date a young lady, and I'd say, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? How many men ask women that today? Most don't.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And the reason why I'm asking these questions of people, and I even asked that in a possible business relationship, because I need to know if I have the capacity to stay with you 5, 10, 20, 50 years. There's a good friend of mine, pastor, him and his wife, they'll be celebrating 60 years of marriage in June. The first thing I said when I realized it was 60 years for them this year, I was like, that doesn't happen. How do you stay with the same woman and the same man for 60 years? And when I asked them, they said compromise. Mm-hmm. We learn what we can give and what we can take on. And where we can compromise, we compromise. And because we had this understanding up front, our relationship and our marriage is strong. And the things that we can't compromise on don't even come up for a discussion. Why? Because it's already been determined this is not a place for compromise.
This reminds me of when I talk relationships, when I've dated women in the past, and I talk about vision, I give a metaphor and I say, the way I look at this is, people say relationships are based on compromise. I say which compromises.
Yes.
Okay, because you don't build a relationship on compromise. You build the relationship on a foundation of shared values.
There you go.
And the metaphor I give is location of living. So, for example, I say, if my vision is to live in New York and your vision is to live in California, again, not literally, don't want to live either place. And she says, we say, but we want to be together, so let's compromise. And well, what is compromise between California and New York? Well, it's a cornfield in the middle of Nebraska.
Right.
That's not going to make either one of us happy.
No.
So now we got to compromise on everything because we've compromised on the basis of our relationship. Right. So, if I say I want to go to New York and she says I want to go to New York too, okay, well then maybe you should come with me. We should go together. I'll drive and you be by my side, right?
There you go.
And you handle this, you handle the kids, you handle where we're going to eat, how we're going to stop, and I'm driving the car and you're right next to me. But we started with a shared values, but then we also said, here's the things that we're going in the right direction, we're in the same place. If we're going to the same destination, then we can compromise about a lot of things along the way. I know that she doesn't like Mexican food, but likes Indian food. Okay, fair enough. Well, I like both, so I'll eat Mexican by myself if she doesn't do that, right? So you're find those things you can compromise on. Where I think that it's difficult for, I'm not a politician. Never been involved in politics whatsoever. So it's easier for me to imagine, yeah, of course, you guys that are the politicians and closely involved, you guys should compromise. I don't like seeing what I saw the other week with the budget. Right. But how does that impact me as a voter and my relationships with people? And can I work that into my conversations and how I'm approaching? Like, how can I think of compromise in my personal relationships and in my personal conversations? Can you give me any insight on that?
So when it comes to especially things of politics, when you're talking about the budget and things of that nature, it's almost like dealing with a household situation. You like you said, you have the foundation. Mm-hmm. Your foundation has been laid. So you know what area you're looking at, you're willing to compromise on, and what you're not. You know that nothing foundationally you're willing to compromise on. Why? Because if you compromise on anything foundationally, it causes the whole house to crumble. So you never compromise on your foundation. But there may be some principles that can still get you to your end goal or to your destiny that may have room or space for compromise. So now when we look at this omnibus bill and how much is going to this country or that country, should be a conversation that voters have with their legislators.
Yeah.
Why is it that there is more of my tax dollar funding going to other nations that's going to protect my southern border? Why are we spending billions of dollars to protect borders of other nations, and you're telling me that borders don't matter? Obviously they do. You're just saying they don't matter to our country. But biblically, I recognize that every country in the Bible had borders because the wars were fought over land for the most part. They were fought over land, over territory. If you have land or you have territory, there's a border that designates that as your territory.
Right.
So now that we have determined that, and this is what this new thing where it's supposedly a white supremacist model to say America first. Would you be still married if you didn't put your family first? If you got married?
Absolutely not.
So why should you still be in leadership and you won't put our country first? Oof. So that should be the model for anyone running for office. When they start talking about what they're going to do for everyone except for America, and they don't actually, and this is what I don't want. I don't want you to talk about it without having a plan that I can visually see. That's one of the things that I respected the most about President Trump that a lot of people missed. If they ever went to his websites, the different websites that he put up, everything that he said he was going to do, he had a path, a plan to get there on his website.
That's thoughtful. It makes me remember that. I guess I haven't noticed this like you have. So many things are what we ought to do, but if you talk about how you're going to do it, then people can pick at it.
There you go.
Well, here's why that won't work. And by the way, I didn't agree with every single one of Trump's policies.
I didn't either.
Didn't like the steel tariffs. I didn't like a lot of things. Other tariffs. That's not. I didn't think that was right. But when you tell how, you actually get to be scrutinized.
Yes.
But when you just tell what, like, hey, we need to improve X. We need to have better outcomes for so-and-so.
Right.
We want so-and-so to be more successful. Then there's no criteria about it. You're judging the policy by its intentions.
Yes.
Not by its actual outcomes.
That's it.
And the actual policy itself is not there to be scrutinized. It's not there to be judged, to be talked about. And that is very respectable about Trump. Even the things that I didn't disagree with him on, at least he was telling me we can talk about those things and scrutinize those things before it's, hey, this has got to be passed, then we can figure out what's in it.
Right.
That attitude.
And so I admired that about him. And one of the things that I tried to share a lot with Black America and Latino America, he had websites. I can't remember the web names, but one was my contract with Black America, and my contract with Asian America. And so when you went through the website, he laid out, this is where we are in our country with relationships in your community. This is the path that I plan to take to get us here. And so I love that how he laid that out. And so he laid it out for the individual communities, but then he also laid it out for all of America.
Right.
This is where America currently is. He didn't do a whole lot of dwelling on this is how we got there or blaming this one and that one. Unless he was put on the spot and someone said, well, who's to blame? Then he admit, this is who's to blame. Which, today all we hear from our current president is Trump's to blame. Trump's to blame. I just heard him yesterday say, yeah, gas prices are going up again because of Trump. Because of Trump's case in New York. I'm like, but you're the president. You're the one that passed the policy that stopped oil drilling in the United States of America and on the coast.
Right.
Which while we were drilling and producing our own energy, our prices were falling drastically. But now that we're dependent upon foreign oil again, our prices are going up. Why? Because we're at their demand. And you're begging OPEC to make a per barrel adjustment when we can just drill right here.
This is one of the things that I'm normally very critical when people give the president credit for everything and blame the president for everything. I think we exaggerate their influence in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things going on besides the president. But I got to tell you, when it comes to energy prices, the amount of strength that we've allowed them to take a little more and a little more and a little more.
Yes.
When it comes to the drilling and things like that, it is, I'm sorry, but I put a lot more weight on the president and his policy when it comes to energy prices than most things.
Yes.
It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
But because of the power that they've been able to gather over years.
Well, and it's because the president goes in and enacts these executive orders.
Yes.
And so you have the legislative branch who makes laws. Most people don't understand because they're not teaching the three branches of government,
Right.
the judicial, the legislative, and the executive.
And now everyone's creating laws.
Yes. Now you have everyone. You got the judicial branch trying to say, well, we created a law because your opinion is not law. Your opinion is your opinion.
Yeah.
Your opinion is not law. Laws are created by the legislative branch. Our Constitution is clear about that. The executive branch's job is only to enforce the laws that were created by the legislative branch. The judicial branch, their only job is to interpret what the law is and how the law should be enforced.
So, correct me if I'm wrong here. So, I don't like the word interpret.
Right. I don't either.
I like the word apply.
Yes.
Because interpret feels more creative.
It is. And that's what we're getting is because they're using these different language and they are becoming more creative. Mm-hmm. They're making it look as if, well, this is what we believe was in the mind of our founding fathers you don't know it's like me sitting here with you and me saying, well, I know exactly what you're going to say next, Joshua.
Yeah.
And this is what you're going to say. And you're like, no, that's not what I was going to say.
Right.
Well, and I'm going to get into a debate with you. Yes, that is what you were going to say. You just didn't know that was what you were going to say.
But and here's why you were going to say it.
Yes. and this is where they are with their whole interpretation. And I agree. It should not be an interpretation. It should be, this is what it says. And we have to follow this to the letter. This is what happened with Roe v. Wade. See, remember everybody saying Roe v. Wade was the law of the land? Roe v. Wade was never law of the land.
Right.
Never was. Why? Because the Supreme Court does not make laws. Roe v. Wade was a court opinion that we just took on and we received it as law because we were told it was law. Mm-hmm. And we allowed over 60 million babies to be executed across the U.S. while the Chinese kept having babies, while the Latinos in Mexico and South American countries kept having babies. We were killing, and this is what I tell Black America, you killed off, they say roughly the black community that's on record, they killed off roughly 25 million black babies since 1973. You would not still be 14% of the population if you didn't kill those 25 million babies.
Is it 14? I thought it was more like 12. Is it 14?
14.
Now? Yeah. Where do you think they would be? Well, obviously you have to, it's exponential because those babies would have babies. So it's not actually 25 million. It's
right.
more
so
than
it's
that.
going to be more than that because those babies didn't get a chance at life to have babies, to have their grandbabies and great grandbabies. So all those generations were cut off.
And we've got, 330 million people in the United States?
Correct.
Another, 25 is very conservative if they each had 2 kids.
Right. Well, and even beyond that, if you even look at the Anglos that have killed off their babies the same way, and the Latinos that are here that have killed off their babies the same way, we could easily be at 500,000.
The birth, it's culturally not. It's culturally not as accepted in the Latino community, from what I've seen. You correct me if I'm wrong. The Latinos have the highest birth rate in the United States, and especially those that have that are newer to the United States. So we do have. The trajectory is bleak for America as far as population, especially when it comes to blacks and whites.
Yes, and it has been, and I agree. And the thing that we're having is it's not necessarily the Latino culture that's coming from other countries. It's the Latino American culture because they have bought into the culture of death also.
Got it.
So the Latino Americans that are born and raised here, they have bought hook, line, and sinker into the culture of death.
Got it.
And so they're running to the abortion clinics at the same number. But what I love, there's an organization out of San Antonio. They put together all these videos, and I'm going to be having them at the church pretty soon to have this discussion with just ladies sharing their stories. These are ladies that have had abortions, and they're talking about the emotional and the physical turmoil that they've been through.
Yeah.
And how it has done them more harm, long-term harm, having the abortion than it would have having the child. Mm-hmm. And so now they're wanting to heal those wounds and restore their lives that they could have had. And that I believe God will still grant them because they've repented, they've turned around. There's a young lady that I met through their group, 27 years old, 27, 28. She's had 24 abortions.
Wow.
Now she's married, wants to have children with her husband and can't because so much of her insides have been cut out after abortion, after abortion, after abortion. And she literally said on camera, I saw abortion as birth control.
Wow.
She said, I was told it's just a fatty cell and just tissue and that it's not a baby. And no one ever told me that every time they cut the tissue out of me, that it was taking life, years off of my life. It was taken away from me being able to reproduce. And so here she is with her husband wanting to have kids and can't. And she had to go to the extremity of having a, a hysterectomy.
Yeah.
Just last year.
You know, there's something that bothers me with this, and this is more of a philosophical sense, and that's that we let narratives become dominant. And I feel like that with the abortion narrative, it's become dominant.
And it shouldn't be, because there's so many other issues. And now
other viewpoints that are valid viewpoints from women that have different opinions and different experiences, but they cannot be heard because someone might interpret that, well, hold on, their opinion matters too, their experience matters too. We should hear, we owe it to folks to, if we're going to say women should have a choice, then the women should have a choice based on information that's coming from a broad range of perspectives and trust them to weigh that. If we're truly on board with women's choice, then we shouldn't be filtering the information that women get. It shouldn't be just from one perspective. We should hear, hey, here's your other resources, here's your other options. You have abortion as an option, if that's legal or whatever. Then here's another option. Here's another option. And by the way, here's what experts from each of these things say, and these are your choices.
Right.
But the thing that bothers me about this, and this is what angers me, is it's so manipulative, is one choice is characterized, this goes back to what you're talking about as the importance of words, right?
Yes.
One choice is characterized as being choice.
Right.
Either you don't have a choice or you have a choice. And so if you do you believe in choice? Okay, then this is your choice.
Right.
Do you believe in choice? Then this is your choice. That would be like me saying, do you believe that we should have options of the beverages we put in our body? Yeah, of course I believe we have that. Okay, then you got to drink orange juice, and orange juice is what you're drinking.
Right.
Oh, what?
It almost appears that the only place you can have it your way is a Burger King. and so, but which is not reality. Because, like you said, there are other choices. There are other options, which is why in June this year, I'm actually going to be hosting a listening session. And I'll be inviting the entire DFW community to come out to the church on a Wednesday night for a listening session. And we're going to hear from all these different women to be able to share their different perspectives. And I want politicians, I want other people in the community, I want pastors to just come listen. And that's why it's just a listening session. And I want people to absorb it in so that they can make their own informed decision. Because I feel like in today's society, that's where we're failing people.
Yeah.
We're not providing people with the information so that they can make informed decisions. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, Hosea 4:6. Where does knowledge come from? Knowledge comes from information.
Yeah.
If I don't provide you the information, you don't get knowledge to know to go to be like Solomon and go to God and say, God, now that I have this information and this knowledge, give me wisdom how to use it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I hate the terminology that people use so frequently, saying knowledge is power. I don't believe knowledge is power. I believe wisdom is power, because you can have knowledge and be another Hitler. Hitler had knowledge. Mm-hmm. But when you have the wisdom of how to use the knowledge, God gives us wisdom how to use the knowledge to produce, to recreate, to multiply whatever it is that we're using that wisdom, that knowledge and information toward. Wisdom comes from God. And so I believe we have to, as we get the information that gives us the knowledge, we have to go to him to get wisdom. And our legislators should be going to him to get wisdom. So I want to be a mechanism and a vessel to provide people those options, those listening sessions for those options to hear. I'm also planning to do a listening session for people to hear from law enforcement, because I hear so much in the Latino community and the Black community about, police brutality. Is it really as much police brutality as you think?
Did you see that recent study from Roland, what is his last name, at Harvard?
Yes.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Basically what he found was, I haven't read this study, but basically what he found was they gathered a tremendous amount of information, and he said that on the low level, and I don't know how to define that, you can help me, but the low level stuff, there was some difference in treatment that was found.
Right.
But when it came to how they were prosecuted, or how they were deaths and beatings, or I don't have the correct way to term these things, you can correct me, but he didn't find any difference.
Yeah.
And now that, I don't want to gloss over that there was no problem, because the fact that a person is treated differently at the low level stuff, that's really problematic.
Right,
That's something we need to fix, right? They liked that part.
Right.
The part they didn't like was they didn't find the stuff that we hear in the news.
Right.
That is the shootings and death and unwarranted, and how they're treated differently and things like that.
And the reasoning that I see, or I'll say the pattern that I see with the low level stuff treatment, is that when you look at his research, the numbers are where the differences are the greatest are in cities that are run by liberal DAs.
Okay. Yeah.
And most people would never see that pattern.
Yeah.
So you have liberal DAs that were overwhelmingly elected because they're supposed to bring us social justice.
Yeah.
And I hate that term.
Yeah.
I don't believe in social justice. I believe in biblical justice. Mm. I believe in biblical justice so much that, I wish we had corporal punishment again.
Yeah, I do too.
Real corporal punishment.
Yeah.
Where, you getting hung at noon, especially for these pedophiles.
Oh, yeah.
Hang them all at noon right in front of the old red courthouse downtown. I'll be out there cheering them on.
You might even put them on pay-per-view, raise some money for the families.
Exactly, because why are we wasting taxpayer dollars feeding these people and housing them for 30, 40 years?
It is one of the most shameful things that I've ever seen in my life. Because it is not the sentence on them. It is you are sentencing the family
to have to suffer through that for years.
And not only that, but you're financially penalizing them to keep them alive for the rest of their life. I got to pay for that.
Yes.
The family of the victim has to pay for that. And there is one thing I have no patience for. I'm sorry, it just makes me angry. People say, well, it's more expensive to execute them than it is to keep them. Yeah. Shut up. Get out of here with that crap. No, that's because of legislative bureaucracy. And listen, I'm fine with saying let's have a high bar. Let's have a high bar. But we all know, we without a shadow of a doubt, we contract this thing out cheapest. Who can execute on this goal of terminating this evil person as quickly, as cheaply as possible?
Let's just send them to Saudi Arabia. They do it every day still, to this day. Let's send them to Ghana.
Yeah.
Where the king of Ghana They execute them every day. Matter of fact, Saudi Arabia, they throw you off the roof of a building. I mean, and that's what I love, about how their corporal punishment is in these other countries. China still does that. If you steal, they cut your hand off that you stole with.
Yeah.
Still to this day. And we're like, well, that's inhumane.
I saw a stat that said, and I forget the stat. I wish I had it with me. Maybe I can cut it in later. But something like if you took anyone that's had 3 violent felonies or 2 violent felonies, and you took them out of, then crime would fall by over 50%. Just like that. I think it was way over 50%. It's the same people that are doing the same crimes.
It is.
And when you're seeing what's happening with the illegal aliens, it's the people that are committing crimes. It's, okay, he's been deported 3 times. He's had 3 violent felonies. He's had this. And why are we surprised that this is happening? And it stinks because these types of things lead to xenophobia.
Right.
But here's the thing. This is why I think that ultimately the powers that be want that. They want division, because division they use to favor the Democratic Party. It is what it is. But when you're putting the worst part of your society, because here's the thing. This has nothing to do with the color of one's skin or culture or anything like that. In every culture on earth, there is a percentage of your population that's crazy. And I mean crazy in a really bad way. There's a portion of your population that's evil.
Yes.
There's a portion of your population that is seriously mentally deranged.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with where you come from, who you're at. Doesn't matter. There's a portion that's evil that needs to be dealt with so everyone else can be safe.
Right.
But if you allow those people, when you put the worst part of any culture, any civilization, any color of your skin, you put the worst part of them back on the street and let them keep what they're doing, what are you putting in the average person's mind?
That it's okay for me to do what I'm doing because I'm gonna have to do some jail time, maybe, but I'll be out in 6 months.
Yeah, that, and you're also saying, so in all the law-abiding citizens that this person from this country, Venezuela or whatever, is like,
they have more rights than you, and you're a citizen.
That, but also there's that xenophobic element of,
yes,
well, those Venezuelans are doing this, and that's
right,
the way they are. Well, no, it's a very small percentage of them,
right,
but we're not dealing with the evil part of them. Most of these are good people, yes, that want a better life for their family. I understand that. I agree with that. I still believe they should have a legal and orderly path to citizenship. I don't think they should be cutting the line. I don't think of any of these. I want order with these things, but I am generally pro-immigration, but I want to see it done orderly and thoughtfully. I want people that want to be Americans, not, and you can be what you can be happy about your culture and celebrate your whatever, but you want to come here and be Americans, right, and be like us, yes, be like Americans. I don't care we're a nation of immigrants, but here's the thing, a nation of immigrants who wanted to become Americans,
yes,
not a nation of immigrants
that still
wanted little to nations.
Have an allegiance, exactly, to where they came from.
Exactly. And you've got, Ilhan talking about about the interest of Somalia,
right,
and Somalian flags. No, either you're representing the Americans or not. Either we're number one, or not.
And that goes to what I was saying earlier about the America First. Mm-hmm. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you're not planning to put America first, you shouldn't be elected to office.
Yeah.
Ilhan Omar and AOC and all these people, they're talking about, well, we need to support Islam and we need to support this nation and that nation. Well, what about America? What about all the violence that's happening in your districts? All this violence is happening in Chicago and New York and Illinois and just all these different areas that these people represent. These are they're representing. Maxine Waters out in L.A. She represents a high crime district and blames everybody else, but yet she's the one that's been in office for 47 years.
Yeah, she's one of the longest terming.
Yes. Dianne Feinstein just died, so that's the only reason she's not still in there.
Yeah.
But
I think she served a couple of terms, but she might have already been dead.
right, more than likely, they just vote her in anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got, and it happens on both sides of the aisle. I'll give you an example. We have a Republican here in Texas. I have respect for him, but I need him to step aside. He's running for re-election right now. He has not, these last 2 years, he has not been to D.C. at all. He's a congressman. John Carter. Yeah, I'm saying his name, John Carter. He ran for office. He's battling cancer. I have utmost sympathy for that.
Yeah.
But you need to step aside and let someone that can go to D.C. and lead, go to D.C. and lead.
I hate it that it stinks so bad when you have to look at life and look at circumstances and say, I'm sorry, but it's not working.
Right. And he's still running. They elected him this last time. So actually this will be 4 years that he's been battling this and hadn't been to D.C. for one vote.
Yeah.
When you check his voting record, he hadn't been there to vote.
Wow.
4 years. And he's running for re-election right now. And he'll get re-elected in November.
Well, let's stay on this trend of beating up on Republicans a minute, because we've beat up on Democrats a bit. So let's change teams for a second.
Yes, definitely.
So, one of the things that it seems like it just keeps coming up is, when you hear about a Trump, and I know you've advised Trump on matters in the past and maybe currently, but the issue of his the way he carries himself at times, or the way that he's talked to, the grab them by the,
right.
that is probably the headline of how can a Christian man, how can a party that's supposed to have family values and Christian values, how can they vote for a man who says something like that at some point?
And I love how you said that, because that's actually the reason why you can accept that person. Because the Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And we have to recognize at that phase of his life, he wasn't a Christian. He hadn't accepted Christ. He hadn't found a path. But there is this thing that God came for called forgiveness. And he came in the form of, in the embodiment of a man to teach us how to forgive, to teach us how to love. Forgiving is not always bringing up your faults, but forgiving is, even though I remember, I'm willing to look past what I remember and support your growth for where I see you being able to go now that you are in Christ. Because the Bible also says that in Christ, you're a new creation.
Right.
What we miss on that is that he's not talking about in your flesh. When you accept him, you're immediately made new in your spirit and in your soul. But you're being made new in your flesh. So that's a process that happens over time. As you get more entrenched in the Word of God and you allow His Word to become a part of you, and you start seeking to live out His Word in your life, now all of a sudden your flesh becomes subject to the Spirit. So now you're no longer walking after the flesh, but you're walking after the Spirit, and the Spirit now seeks to please God. And as your spirit man seeks to please God, your fleshly man is being changed every day. That's why Paul said clearly, I die to myself daily.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that we have to die to ourselves daily. And most men, if they are really going to be honest, they've said something either of that nature or worse at some point in their lives. They've said something that they don't want their wives to know that they said, or their girlfriends to know that they said, because, well, I'm married now and I have a newfound respect for women. Where did that come from? Did it come from getting married, or did that come from a relationship with God? Either way, you're not where you were. Mm-hmm. And so most of us, we can say, even if we don't know Christ, we may not be where we want to be, but we're not where we were.
Yeah.
And the man we are today is not who we shall be. And so if we're still seeking and striving to get to that place, where we shall be empowered and where we shall be different and where we shall be enlightened, that's the key. Because I can't focus on the past. I can't even focus on the present because God is working on me in the present. But what I can focus on is getting myself aligned so that tomorrow I can be a different Troy than what I am today.
Yeah, it reminds me of, we talk about the soul as being the mind, the will, and the emotions. And when we're saved, that doesn't mean that our soul is purified. Our soul is naturally corrupt, and by the way, it's influenced all the time. And so if we think of our mind, well, that's like our mentality, and the mentality that we've grown up with, we've grown up around, the culture that we're with, that's all influencing us. Even once that we understand the fact that we should have a kingdom mentality, that doesn't mean that it's not a click.
Right.
It's not like a change of clothes. And then, of course, your will. How do I align my will with the will of Christ? And then my emotions. Okay, that's the hardest one of all.
Yes.
Because I can, I grew up in a great family, and I didn't use profanity as a kid, and then I was actually pretty good in college, and then I got into the work world, and then I was around profanity constantly.
Yes.
And in college football, there were some as well. But I got to say, people always say, "Oh, the locker room talk." Honestly, the Wall Street talk was way worse than the locker room talk. To be honest with you, understand. And so when I became convicted about that and started seeing that was rubbing off on me, and this is this habit that I have.
Right.
It is unbecoming of who I want to be. I'm acting in a way that I don't like that part of me.
Yes.
And so, but then when an emotion hits you, or you're in traffic, and all of a sudden something comes out of you,
right.
and it says, I said, where did that come from? Well, the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I got that in my heart. And so it is work to say, I don't want this, and Lord, help me to overcome this. I reject this part of myself, and working to get from apologizing, or you're repenting, as we call it, repenting, to prevention.
There you go.
And it is a little bit every day, and some days it's like I tell people that your walk with Christ is a lot more like the stock market, which is there's ups and downs, and it's hopefully it's always it's eventually going up, but it is interesting for me. This is a bigger picture that we tend to, when we talk about Christians, is we want to compare them to Christ, and that you must be perfect, or it's the most insidious, I think, thing that we get is that we're supposed to be a Christian. Okay, when I say I'm a Christian, a follower of Christ, what I mean by that is that I've accepted my mortality.
Right.
I've accepted my inadequacy.
Right.
I've accepted that I definitely need help.
Right.
And that left to my own devices, I tend to deteriorate, Troy.
Yes.
I tend to become less of a good person. Now, I'll kind of settle into an area that I won't get any worse.
Right.
But I will kind of go back down to my kind of average here. My average is not as good as my best, and it's not as bad as many other people I can think of. And that's it, because I can always think of someone always can think of someone who's behind me, or I'm doing better than, and I get to pick the area that I'm doing better than too. That's the area I'm going to focus on, right? So it is a humility that leads me to Christ.
Yes.
I believe it was Athanasius, I forget, but it was one of the early church fathers that said that the church should be not a museum of the saints, but a hospital for sinners. Yeah. And in other words, that it's not to go see where the holy people are. Right. And that's the way that I think that the world obviously oftentimes to look at this is, well, you're supposed to be a saint. Yeah. No, I'm a sinner that's in the hospital that is continually that I'm continually asking the Spirit of Christ to help me, the Holy Spirit to help me to be a better person and to be a better witness and be more conformed to the image of Christ than I currently am now.
And I believe that's what makes you a saint, because you're still in a place where your conviction sets in. Mm-hmm. The Bible says, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. Mm-hmm. So the person that is a all-out sinner, they don't even recognize that they're a sinner. They don't recognize that there's a God. There's no conviction coming in. They're just doing, what's the new phrase today? They're just doing them. Mm-hmm. They're living their best life now. Mm-hmm. They don't recognize. But the difference in a saint and a sinner is that a saint is someone that is convicted by the Holy Spirit when they're in their sin and in their folly, when they fall away and when they slip up and when they have those mess ups. And they find a place that they can go to, which is in the Word of God. They find a place in His presence. They can talk to the King of Glory. They can have these conversations, and He will forgive them. He's just to forgive them of their sins and set them back on the course. But if you're a sinner, you don't even care. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. And so I always remind people of God that we're not sinners saved by grace. Once we were saved, you were a sinner saved by grace. You are now the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. That's what the word says. Mm-hmm. So as the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus, that's why you have the conviction that's come in anytime you do things that are contrary to the word of God. Mm-hmm. Because you're walking not in your righteousness, but in His righteousness. And he's placing you in a place of justification and right standing with the Father. And so that's why as you slip and you sin and you fall and you falter, you can be convicted in those places. But if you were a straight sinner, would you ever feel convicted? And when you cuss somebody out or flip somebody off in traffic, you wouldn't.
Right.
It's your sin nature.
Right.
Your sin nature is living and thriving in you. But when you put aside and put away that old sin nature, conviction comes in, and conviction sets you on a course to where you don't even see that stuff. Because all you see is that, God, I was wrong. And I need you to forgive me of that. And now that I identify that issue is still in my heart, help purge me of that.
Yeah.
Clean me of that. Because I don't like that me. Mm-hmm. I like the me that I was before that came. And God is saying, you're still that me. You just had a minor setback. But your setback is always a setup for a comeback. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you can even acknowledge that I had a slip up is major. Because any real sinner can never acknowledge that they're a sinner. Mm-hmm. Because they don't know the difference between a sin nature and a God nature. Mm-hmm. Like you said something earlier that was really key when you talked about the church being a hospital for sinners. The church is a hospital for all of us. Mm-hmm. And I've always said that. And I find it interesting that people come into the church saying, well, I can't believe this person hurt me. They get church hurt, I call it. Yeah. Well, if you're going to the hospital, everybody in there is hurt and wounded, cut, bruised, abused. Hurt people.
Yeah.
And so we're all in there looking for some type of healing. Mm-hmm. From the pulpit to the pews, to the parking lot.
Right.
We're all looking to be healed. The only difference is I'm just a little bit further ahead of some of the people that I'm leading.
Right.
And I spend a little bit more time with God than some of the people that I'm leading so that I can lead them into all truth. And it's not that I don't have my struggles and not that I don't have my issues, but I'm like Tony Robbins in the church. Mm-hmm. What did Tony Robbins always say? You can have it too. You can have victory too. You can have peace too. You can have joy too. Amidst all of your struggles and all the vicissitudes of life, you can have it too.
Yeah.
The grace of God and the peace of God can be with you. You can have it too.
Yeah, I like how you said I'm a little further ahead of you, or I spend more time with God with you, and it can also be that I'm a little ahead of you in these areas, but not necessarily in these others, right?
Yes.
And when we think about children, and the best teacher for a third grade level student is, guess what? A fourth grade level student.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a college professor. It's not me. It's not you. It's a fourth grader. They're a little ahead.
Yes.
And they've had a little more experience, and so they relate well. That's a huge thing of this attitude of either you're perfect as a Christian, as Christianity is perfection, or you're not a Christian, or you're a fake Christian, or you're a false Christian. Now, I do understand that there's a big difference in failing and slipping up and seeing it versus living a way of sin unrepentant.
Yes.
That's very different.
Correct.
So let's take this back to Trump. I want to give you a chance to make sure we clarify what you're saying is. It sounds like you're saying, that was sinful and that was unbecoming and disrespectful, and so what?
Right.
Elaborate on that.
Exactly.
What's your bottom line?
And so the so what is, that's who he was.
Yeah.
It's not who he is. And it's not who God is calling him to be. So when I look at people, I don't look at them on who they were. Mm-hmm. I don't even look at them on who they are. I look to see what God is calling them to be. And I garner my prayers and my support for them, not around what they did in the past, because Paul said it clearly, forgetting those things which are behind. I press toward the mark of the high prize of the calling of God in Christ Jesus. And so if I can look at you, Joshua, and I can see that you're pressing toward him, mm-hmm. I can forget your now and I can forget your yesterday, because your heart is pressing toward him. And I understand that with your heart pressing toward him, he's going to make you more like him. And eventually you're going to come to a place where you don't even recognize the Joshua that you are. Mm-hmm. You won't even know when you became the Joshua that you are. Mm-hmm. And it's all going to be because you sought after him. You were seeking after him. And so he changes us over time. And so there are some things that I've done years ago, and I tell people this all the time. I say, if I'm running a political campaign and something comes up, more than likely, I won't remember saying it, doing it, whatever happened, but it doesn't matter. Why? Because it's all under the blood. You may want to hold on to it because you need something to hold against me. You go right ahead. Because the more you holding something against me, the more you can't focus on getting closer to him. Mm-hmm. The more you can't, you don't have the ability to focus on stepping into your purpose.
Yeah, the thing that you keep between you and me,
right?
You can't just keep it between me and you.
Right.
You keep it between you and God.
You do. And you cut off your access. He says, if you have any fault with your brother, go to him. He didn't say go to the multitude and go to the media and go have a press conference. He said, if you have aught in your heart against your brother, go to him. Mm-hmm. Make it right with him.
Yeah.
See, in today's society, we want to go tweet about it.
Right.
We want to go to Twitter or YouTube or Instagram or whatever these other platforms and talk about the issue between. That's not what God said. He said, I need to go to my brother and I need to ask my brother to forgive me of this issue, this transgression that I have in my heart against my brother. Mm-hmm. And he said, when I fix what's up between me and my brother, even if I go to you and you say, well, I still don't forgive you, it opens me up to where now at least I did follow the process and I can go to God, and God says, okay, now you can have my forgiveness because you went to the person that you had aught in your heart against. Mm-hmm. He didn't forgive you, but I forgive you because you followed the process. You understood the biblical principles. Mm-hmm. Goes back to the party platform principles and life principles. Mm-hmm. If we follow the principles, God will forgive us. Mm-hmm. And he's just to do so. But when you don't follow the principles, you end up wallowing in sin like a pig wallows in the mud. Mm-hmm. Why does a pig enjoy the mud? Because that's his nature.
Yeah.
So we have to ask ourselves, where is our nature? Is our nature in the mud, or is our nature on the throne of grace? Mm-hmm. I want my nature on the throne of grace.
So when you think about, obviously Trump is a highly flawed individual.
Yes.
Other politicians are the same. Right. This is kind of the funny part of it is, but again, I don't think that Trump puts his faith front and center like you do. Right. You're the thing the even what you have on your neck here today is it's clear that you're a Christian. But maybe other politicians don't,
right.
As well. But Trump doesn't. Neither does Biden.
Right.
Why is it that we seem to have that pushback against the right versus the left when it comes to alignment with your principles, faith principles?
I think a lot of it is that today's culture is in a place where they don't want faith on display. Mm-hmm. Because they've been taught that it's bad to have faith on display. And a lot of it came through this fallacy of there being a separation of church and state.
Right.
And so now no one wants any faith on display. They feel like any faith on display is a mockery to God, or is something wrong with you displaying your faith. But I'm here to tell you and any of your listeners that if that's the case, why did Jesus say, if you deny me before men, I'll deny you before my Father in heaven? Mm-hmm. I don't know about anyone else, but I know I don't ever want to be denied. So I will never deny him publicly, privately, by any means. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what men, and this is where we have to get back to where we were years ago. We have to get back to a place to where it doesn't matter about how you feel about me or what you think about me. It matters that I make sure that there's never a blockage between my soul and my Savior. Mm-hmm. And the only person that can remove a blockage between my soul and my Savior is me. So I have to speak what I have to say. You can take it, you can leave it. But I believe that if you're a person of faith and you're supporting someone in the public arena, we should put them in such an uncomfortable position that they have to speak about their faith. Because you need to know where they really stand. You need to know what's really in their heart. Because people say a lot of stuff. We've heard politicians for years make us all types of promises and never fulfill any of them. But if we back them into a corner and cause them to profess their faith publicly and openly, just the same way as we cause them to profess their positions on the issues publicly, we should do the same thing with their faith. Because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Mm-hmm. And so if you back them into the right corner, whatever's in their heart is what's going to come out. Mm-hmm. And if you still support them, if vile things come out of their mouth and vile things come out of their heart, not 20 years ago, but today, mm-hmm. and you still support them. And I had somebody tell me, well, I forget, it was somebody else that was on the campaign trail. Well, they said a curse word. I said, so when was the last time you said one? Did God discredit you for that? Did God write you out for that? Well, no, but I hold them to a higher standard. I said, well, God holds you to a higher standard because you profess to be an example of him.
What is that, Matthew 6, Matthew 7, where he talks about the same measure that you're judging those you'll be right. judged on?
Which is really clear.
So it's hard to say that. How do you call yourself because they call yourself a Christian, but you need to take a big step back in your arrogance here if you're saying, I hold someone to a higher standard than me. Right. That should never come out of a Christian's mouth. That should never come
out of a Christian's mouth. Because there's only one standard, and it's God's standard.
There's only one standard, it's God's standard, but the only standard that I have means to even compare, if right. I was even try, is
right.
It is arrogance.
Yes.
To judge someone by a higher standard than you.
And the Bible also says all there is in the world is the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Yeah. What he hates the most is the pride. Arrogance is a form of pride. And so when you get into that, then you have to remember it's that pride comes before a fall.
Yeah, and that's also the source of comparison. I forget what the quote is, but comparison is the root of so much emotional turmoil in us.
Yes.
That it's not about having more; it's about having more than your brother. It's not about being smart; it's about being smarter than your brother. It's not about being successful at work, is being more successful than your neighbor. It's not about having a nice house. I mean, there's been research about neighborhoods. And what's been found is you're going to be much happier. Let's say you have a neighborhood that's a solid neighborhood. You're going to be more happier if you're the nicest house in that mediocre neighborhood than if you move a neighborhood up to where you're the smallest house in that neighborhood. You'll be less happy with a nicer house in a nicer neighborhood. You're more happy at the top of where we're at.
Yes.
It's this comparison between other people is we always need to be looking and saying, how do I stack up against this? How do I stack up against this? How do I stack up against this? And finding the ways that we believe that we stack up higher because we're looking for our worth. Whereas I believe that in the Christian walks, what I'm understanding, when I say understand, I mean a process of improving my understanding, deepening my shallow understanding to more reasonable waters, is that it's that my value was given to me, was declared over me, and that value doesn't go up in my value of my soul because I got another degree or because that I made more money or something like that. It is pronounced to me, it's spoken over me, rather than it's something that I go and attain.
That's it. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the biblical heritage of the father.
Right.
Speaking that destiny into that child's life. See, I tried with all the degrees. I got a lot of degrees, but I don't attribute my successes or my failures to my degrees.
Right.
I attribute them to my relationship with God and my relationship with people. Because the only thing that can stop me from doing and knowing what I know is me being out of the right relationships. Relationships are everything. And I learned that not in college. I learned that by building relationships and by seeing good relationships and seeing bad relationships and seeing how both can be beneficial. Because if I don't have bad relationships, I can never know what a good one looks like.
Yeah. A couple months ago, I had Dr. Corey Clark on the podcast. If you haven't seen that yet, you should go watch it. You'd love it. And one of the things that she was talking about is the differences between men and women. And obviously, I believe in balance, and I believe that they both are equal in value, but different in function. And that she talked about how the value system of women, maybe value system is not the right way, but the preferences of women, how more women in the workplace is influencing workplace culture, academic culture, things like this. And one of the things that she highlighted was, I'll say, comfort with or preference for or with meritocracy versus egalitarianism, and that men tend to be more comfortable with competition and meritocracy and rankings and hierarchy, where women tend to have a preference to kind of, hey, let's be fair, let's be equal, everybody is this, everybody is as this, and I understand that from I'm a man, so I'm coming from my perspective as 5-year-olds different than 40-year-olds. And everything in between is, you want your children to grow up and be introduced slowly. They're children. And so the expectations for children of egalitarianism and everybody's fair, then you slowly introduce them to meritocracy because that's the way of the world. And so, this makes me think about, we were talking about the role of, destroying the father and how that in the government becoming the father. Well, what is the role of the father? I think that the traditional definition of what it means to be a man, be a father, is you provide and you protect. And so you're looking at that. A friend of mine said, I wonder why I heard this said, when a problem happens, someone says, oh man. And then when there's something, when they're excited, they say, oh girl.
Right.
And I wonder why that is. I said, well, you know, I'll theorize.
Right.
Is from an evolutionary psychology type thing, and I could be totally wrong, but I was like, well, you know, when bad things happen, when things are dangerous and lives are in danger, is you look for a man.
Yeah.
What man is going to take care of this? There's something that's dirty, that's rotten, that's dangerous.
That's good.
You're looking for a man. When you're looking for the dirtiest, meanest, nastiest problems, people tend to look for a man.
Yes.
And when we've got through that battle, you're looking for a girl. You want to celebrate. You're looking for, where's my wife? Where's my daughters? I want my girls, right?
Yes.
You're looking for, you're a man who's madly in love with 4 women,
right?
Your 3 daughters and your wife. And who do you want around you when you're celebrating? Who do you want? It's like, I think about that, and then I think, you know, this role of the government and us looking to the government as the man, as the government's supposed to protect me.
Right.
The government's supposed to provide for me. And the role of a father should also be to give wisdom. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a big difference in saying what the world ought to be. And we tend to want to judge men, all men, by the way the world ought to be. You ought to be able to walk outside and wear whatever you want, and no one say anything or no one make any assumptions about you. I'm like, okay, I'm not disagreeing with you on the way the world ought to be.
Right.
I'm just saying that
this is the reality.
This is the reality of it. And by the way, the people that are doing bad things tend to do it a lot.
Yes.
And so it creates this assumption that there's more people that are doing bad things because those people are doing bad things to a lot of people.
Correct, and they're doing it often, like you said.
Yes.
They have their areas that, or what I call their comfort zones. This is the area that I'm comfortable in doing bad things in. Why? Because police response time is an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So I can do a whole lot of bad things every hour and a half that I go spend over in this area, because I know if police response time is an hour and a half, I got an hour and 20 minutes to have chaos and turmoil, and then in 10 minutes I can jump on 30 and be in Arlington or something.
So let's talk about the this intersection of faith and politics. You know, traditionally the Black church has been pretty vocal about it in politics, but everything I hear you saying is, from your point of view, is the platform of the Republican Party. Not that big difference saying Republicans are good. That's not what you're saying. You're saying that the platform aligns more with your principles.
Correct.
How is it that a more conservative base of Black folks that are much more likely to attend church, how do they continue to vote Democrat? I mean, why are you right?
And I think a lot of that has to do with what I call the Margaret Sanger model. Okay. For those that don't know, Margaret Sanger was the eugenics, the mother of eugenics,
yes,
and the founder of Planned Parenthood. And her model was, we need to get 3 or 4 prominent Black ministers on the payroll and give them their talking points so that they can lead their sheep to the slaughter, basically. And anybody listening, they can look that up. And she said it in her own words, and she made it happen. And I believe that model today is still the model that's being used by the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. Because
eugenics, by the way, is to me it's a fancy term for racism.
It is. That's all.
And basically, it's saying that certain populations shouldn't be breeding. Certain people shouldn't be breeding. They shouldn't be reproducing. And of course, the government and us elites, we that know better, we should be the ones to determine who should be breeding and who shouldn't be breeding. And you can't actually come out at that point and say this community shouldn't breed. You can't do that. Like that was rejected.
Right.
So how do you get the attitude, the same outcome if you're a eugenicist that believes that Black folks and other certain populations shouldn't be reproducing, we should have less of them? How do you get your goal of eugenics across, despite the fact that that the public opinion is going against racism? I mean,
and what she was able to do was to sell the Black church leaders on the fact that it was the most beneficial thing to their race or to their ethnicity.
Okay.
And she was able to
that's hard to buy. You got to unpack that one for me.
And so the way she sold it to them is that, you have young women and young families that can't afford any more than 2 or 3 children. Mm-hmm. And instead of using birth control, which was still available then, the model was, let's just terminate the pregnancies. And if you terminate the pregnancies, then they can still live the life that they want to have. They can still afford to take care of the family that they have. They can still afford to take the vacations and the trips, because now they don't have the burden of another child.
Okay.
So you can continue to live life, and it's not going to be a burden on your life. And so that's the modern theme that I hear today. People talk about, well, she doesn't, her body, her choice, and she doesn't want to have the kid. But the number one reason why I hear that women are saying that they want the abortions is because the abortion is going to affect their way of life. Mm. They're not going to be able to be independent and do all the things that they've been doing. And so they I don't want children, but I don't want to use contraceptives. Mm-hmm. I want to live a promiscuous lifestyle, but I don't want to utilize anything that will prevent me from an unplanned pregnancy.
Right.
And which I think is a travesty. Mm-hmm. And so I don't agree with the whole sexual activity before marriage and all of those things. However, it happens. And so if you're going to engage in those things, I would say that you need to take all the precautions that you need to take. Because not only do you have to worry about, to this day and age of pregnancy, there's all types of STDs and so forth out there. A young woman that I had in my church some years ago, she said, well, Pastor, I didn't want to get pregnant by him, so I had an abortion. I'm like, so you had unprotected sex with a guy that you didn't want to have his kid, so you had an abortion. First of all, why were you in such heat that you had to have sex with somebody that you didn't want to get pregnant by? Yeah. And then you did it without protection.
Yeah.
These are just the logical conversations that I think we're not having in the church. And so even beyond the eugenics things, they're just regular life conversations that are ceasing to happen in the church. And I believe that it is the church's responsibility to have these conversations. We need to be talking about faith. We need to be talking about family. We need to be talking about finances. We need to be talking about community and how we can better our community. When we had less crime in the 60s and 70s, you know who policed their communities more than the police? The church. You saw the deacons and the pastors of the church. They were patrolling the streets with baseball bats, driving the criminal element out of their communities. You don't see that today. Mm. Why? Because the fathers have been removed. Men have not been taught their roles, like you were talking about, being that protective. So you're a protector, you're a provider, and you're the lead. You're the lead principle of wisdom. Mm-hmm. You're where the wisdom is coming from to guide the family, and guide the community, and guide the nation. Why is our nation falling apart? Because we've got males in leadership, but we don't have men in leadership.
Right.
It's a difference.
Tell me the difference between males and men.
And so when you're a man, you understand your role and responsibility. Mm-hmm. That role to protect, mm-hmm. that role to lead, that role to seek divine counsel. When you're a male, you do what males do. It's no different than a male dog. They go out and screw everything, or you put a male bull in a field full of cows, they screw every cow in the field. Why? Because there's no ownership. They're not taking any ownership of their role.
Yes.
They're not taking any ownership of their responsibility. A man takes ownership. If a man fails his family, a man steps up, stands up and says, I take ownership, I failed my family. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to get my family back on track.
Yes.
A male says, I failed my family, so I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. You leave your sons and your daughters uncovered and unprotected. And then you wonder why now all of a sudden at age 12, your son says, I no longer want to be a boy, I want to be a girl because society says I can be whatever I want to be.
Yeah.
Or the new thing, I can be a furry, which that just blew my mind. I had to go look that up. I was doing, because I do some counseling, some community counseling for the state, and I'm counseling a young man that says, I'm a furry. And I'm like, excuse me, what's a furry? And he said, I identify as a rabbit, and I use a litter box at home and at school because I'm a furry. I said, you're not a furry, you're a young man.
Yeah.
I said, you're a young man with a penis.
Yeah.
God made you that way.
Yeah.
And come to find out, he hops around the house, single mom. I don't fault the mom, I fault the dad for not being there to instill manly values and principles into that young man. Whether him and the mother divorced or separated or whatever, that father should have been there to impart divine wisdom and speak and proclaim the destiny of that young man. So now that young man's confused and thinking he's a furry.
Yeah, it requires, to me, I look at it and I say, you don't want a wall with a stick leaning against it. You want two sticks leaning against each other.
Yes.
So more like a teepee, right? And that's the way you want a man and a woman in a marriage.
Yes.
You don't want one of them with a foundation and not the other, because then the wind comes, you just blow the other away. You want them to be leaning into each other.
Yes.
And so if the incentive is greater to not have the man there, if it means you get more money, if it means you get more protection from the state, if it means that you can choose between a man, and by the way, all men are fallible. All men can have tough times.
Oh, definitely.
Data shows that I think it's somewhere like around 90% of divorces initiated by women happen within a couple of months of a man losing his job. And that's difficult. That's difficult for a man to go through. And I'm not saying that there's tons of reasons for people to get divorces that I understand, and there's biblical justifications for those things as well. But it is, for us to act like divorce is not painful.
Right.
And it's desirable, it's just a part of life. It's a sad part of life, and it means that something broke, in my opinion. It means that a mistake was made by one or more, usually more than one person. And when you create this incentives and disincentive system where a man is expendable, then it's going to be, where does he get his worth from? Because the value's not there. Right? So it's like you're seeing it from both sides, is why would I if, and why would I depend on this guy when I could depend on something else? And who is teaching me how to be a man? Who am I looking at? Who am I comparing myself to? What is the measure of a man? And men, we bond side by side. Little boys aren't very good listeners. No. They're very good imitators.
Right.
So they're going to imitate something.
What they see.
And they're going to imitate men. And they're going to imitate, males. They're going to imitate males.
Right.
If there's no males, they're going to imitate females.
Right.
Both of those things can be very problematic, because you don't want your males imitating females.
Correct.
And you don't want your males imitating poor excuses for men.
Correct.
And if you're taking the father out of the home, you risk that.
And a phrase that I like to use is, we're creating cheap copies of great originals.
Oh, wow, that's good. So when you think about you talk about the black church creating, well, first off, summarize what you just said for me in a few words, as far as this. You talk about the Margaret Sanger model. What does that mean?
So that model has pastors, prominent pastors, in a predicament where they're selling poison to their followers, to their sheep. And it's all at the behest of the almighty dollar.
Okay, well, how so?
Whether it comes down to the dollar or being able to get funding for a new church with my name on the side, or a new television program, or things of that nature.
Because their congregation is funding them? Or?
So it's the outside influence.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So there's a lot of, it goes to, like I was saying with the Margaret Sanger model, when you look at her videos from back then and her speech, or listen to her speeches from back then, she said, let's hire 3 or 4 colored ministers. That's the exact term she used. She says, so that when those that are thinking people in the black community start to think and ask questions, we have someone that can sell them our philosophy and they will receive it because they respect the ministers of the church.
Wow. So where is the funding coming from now?
And so now the funding is coming from all of the adverse, not just the Democratic Party, but all these PACs and all these other organizations that have their agendas.
You're telling me they fund the black churches?
They're funding the black churches.
How in the world does that happen?
And they're funding. This is what they're doing. They're funding the leaders.
Okay.
Because if I fund the leaders, now I can get the leaders to take lead on the issues and stand for the issues. I'll give you an example. Prominent pastor in Georgia spoke about growing marijuana in the church. Talked about how the black community needs abortions. Just recently. This is just recently. Wants to use a portion of the church's land to grow marijuana to be able to provide jobs for people in the black community so they can go out and farm marijuana. Why aren't you farming fruits and vegetables? Wouldn't that be more beneficial to the black community to have them out teaching them how to grow fruits and vegetables and growing and having a community garden that they're tilling and working the ground in and providing those things to the community for those that may need fruits and vegetables, teaching them how to slaughter a cow and process it, or slaughter a goat. That is more beneficial than growing marijuana.
Well, the other thing I'd mention too is, when you're thinking about controlling a population, there's a couple things you can do. Number one, you can take away their guns.
Right.
Number two, you can take away their food, or you control their guns, you control their food, you control a population. Because eventually everyone bows down to, you got a gun pointed at you.
Yes.
I can't defend myself, or I got to go to you begging for food.
Yes, and that's totally true. I mean, and I was just sharing this example a few weeks ago. I said, look what they did to the Indians. They disarmed them, and then they took all their land, took all their property from them. Yeah. Look what's happened in all these other countries. They disarm you, then they can control you. Mm-hmm. The disarmament comes first, and then they control the food. Yeah. Right now, we have Bill Gates buying up all of our farmland. Why? Because he's trying to sell this plastic meat or whatever, this lab-grown meat.
Yeah. Chemical meat.
And so if he's growing lab-grown meat, who will have the market for meat? Yeah. He will, because he'll own all the farmland, so nobody can farm. And then in addition, you have the 30 by 30 project, which is by 2030, the plan is for 30% of the land and property in America to all be owned by the government by 2030. And so that's part of the plan, that you'll own nothing and love it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, but I believe it's in Tempe, Arizona, where they just started they have a community that's newly open, where cars are prohibited.
Wow.
An entire community. No cars. Everything's in walking distance. Your jobs, everything is in walking distance. Because they're trying to get us to a place where they can control you. If they can get you out of your cars, see, it went from, okay, we want you in electric cars, because of course with electric cars, they can shut them off whenever they get ready.
Yeah.
To now we're going to put you in a vehicle-less community. Mm-hmm. And the more, they're trying to see how much of your liberties you will surrender.
Yeah.
And the more your liberties you'll surrender, the more they can exert control over you. Mm-hmm. And so we as Americans, we have to stand up and push back and fight for our liberties. You see, I didn't say freedoms.
Yeah.
Because those people think those words are interchangeable, but they're not. Mm-hmm. We have liberties, and we need to stand firm on our liberties. We're talking about the black church and the black community. And when I look at the travesty that's happened over the last 50 to 60 years, they've been told that, so you go to a white church, and I hate that term because there are no white people, because I've never seen anybody to color your shirt that wasn't deceased.
Yeah.
Just saying.
If I may interject here, this is one of the things that I've learned by studying biology is
we're all black. We're just more or less black, because all black is saying is you're saying a lot of melatonin or less melatonin.
Yeah.
And the most genetically diverse people in the world are very black-skinned folks in Africa.
Of course.
And it's as we've moved off and we've gone into little, communities, and we bred with those people that we went through, and we lived in a climate that, this should be common knowledge at this point that, well, the people that are further from the equator, they tended to lighten their melanin, right? All that really means is they got less black. Because it's craziness to me to be separated on something that's as minuscule as the amount of melanin in your skin. And what it means at the end of the day is, I got to be more careful with skin cancer. And you got to be more careful making sure you get enough vitamin D.
There you go. That's it.
It's different. It's different skin problems.
Different spectrum. That's it. And even when you think about the term human, that's just color, men of color.
Yeah.
That's all we all are.
Yeah.
And so we're not separated, and we need to understand as Americans that we need to join together collectively as Americans, despite our ages, despite our the demographics, despite our income levels, despite we have to stand together as Americans, and we have to make sure that we elect America first candidates at all levels, whether it's the school board, city council. If they are not willing to put America first, okay, so you're in Dallas. If you're running for Dallas City Council and you don't have a Dallas first model, and I live in Dallas, I don't want you run on the city council.
Yeah.
I don't want you focused on outside things.
Yeah.
Because you're running not to represent Arlington and Fort Worth and all these other place interests. You're running to represent Dallas. People, they despise, and a lot of people to this day still despise Laura Miller about not letting the Dallas Cowboys come to the city of Dallas. When I think about the debt that the Dallas Cowboys, and I think Jerry Jones is brilliant doing this, the debt that he put the city of Arlington in with bringing the stadium there, and the debt he put Frisco in with bringing the Star practice area to Frisco, that's brilliant. You build this $1 billion stadium, and you make the city that's going to house you spend 80% of the money to build your edifices, and you get to have your taxes waived for 30 years on a 30-year lease. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the property taxes on a $1.1 billion stadium for 30 years, and you have your taxes waived for 30 years, which means you're basically there rent-free? And I think his portion was a couple $100 million on a $1.1 billion stadium.
Absolutely.
That is brilliant to me.
Yeah.
But the people of Dallas, they didn't think of it that way. They just saw we're losing out on the Dallas Cowboys. No, you're not. Just drive right over to Arlington, let them foot the bill, and you go over there and watch the game. The team is still called the Dallas Cowboys. So you're not losing anything, and your tax base didn't increase because the amount that you paid in taxes would have increased.
To me, when we hear terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion, this policy. I'll turn you loose on this here in a second. I can see you laughing. You hear that? One of the things that's always struck me is some of the most depth in relationships that I've ever achieved in my friendships has been with people that are extremely different than me. So I have a deep respect for diversity. However, I think that diversity is a terrible foundation. Yes. I think that it adds depth. But here's the thing is, this is not, I started off as a scientist. Right? I'm a behavioral scientist, and who applies financial concepts to behavioral to understand how people think about money, make decisions with money, behavioral finance. So I start off as a basis of psychology and understanding human behavior. And I understand that the foundation is sameness. The foundation is tribalism. The foundation is what do we have in common. The foundation is family, it's sameness, it's integration, it's all this similarity is what the foundation is. So if you're starting off with diversity, you're starting off with the dumbest thing you can possibly start off with. And that doesn't matter if I grew up on a farm in rural Alabama. And if I went to school and everybody around me is farm kids from rural Alabama, okay, guess what? If we start off on a conversation about all the ways that we're different, guess what? We got a lot more in common than we've got in different. Right. We're isolated places in rural Alabama. Right. But if we start off talking about the ways we're diverse, then that's not a good foundation. Instead, you start off with things you have in common. If I am in, and by the way, I'll illustrate this by giving you an example of, if I'm in Dallas and I see someone with a Dallas Cowboys hat on, I don't say anything. Right. But if I go to Paris, France, and I see someone with a Dallas Cowboys hat on, I'm like, hey, Dallas Cowboys? Right. Right? Exactly. If I'm in the state, I remember my nephews, first time they visited the state of Alabama, because I grew up in Texas. And in Texas, when you see, my brother played football at Auburn, as you know. Right. They saw an Auburn hat. In Texas, it was like, oh, Auburn. Then the first time they went to Alabama, it's like every single Auburn hat, Auburn tag, Auburn. Like, okay, we're in Alabama. Right. We're going to see a lot of these, right? But they had been trained to see those things and point them out. But in Alabama, seeing an Auburn hat is no big deal, right? And so you're trained to look for these types of things. If we're trained to look for similarities rather than differences, right? Instead of starting with the diversity, you start with the sameness. What do we have in common? We have these values, these values, these values, these values. We have this human experience, this human experience, this human experience. We build this entire relationship based on all these things that were incredibly in common. But starting with diversity, it tells me to start with all the things that are different and discuss those first. How do you build a relationship with someone by starting off on every way that you're different? You build relationships on sameness. You do, and the same thing with a male-female relationship. You talked about being single. You don't go and meet a woman and say, let's outline our list of the ways we're different. You want to find out how we complement each other first, and build your relationship on the things that how you complement each other. That's why I totally disagree with the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we're all diverse. Who cares? Mm-hmm. What I need to find is where our common ground is and where our commonalities are. Right. So that we can build a strong foundational relationship, so that we can go and take back territory, so that we can build businesses together, so that we can build communities together. But that can't happen if I'm only focused on what issues we have. We don't know what issues we have until we find out where our commonalities are. We don't know where you can outline and lay out some areas that we think we're diverse in, but are you really diverse in those areas? You don't really know until you find your common ground. When you find your common ground and you work on your common ground and you build and fortify your common ground, you tend to find that the things that you think are diverse issues, it's not that they're diverse issues. You have different approaches to tackling the issue. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I see with the Republican and the Democrat Party. There are Democrats say, well, let's just throw money at all the issues and then they'll eventually go away. Well, you've been throwing money at the issues for years and they've never gone away. Yeah. So what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result. When are we as Americans going to stop doing the same thing, expecting a different result? Mm-hmm. Now you've got historically black colleges saying they want blacks only dorms. You're in a historically black college. How many people do you have on your campus that doesn't look like you? You don't have that level of diversity to have a blacks only dorm. And isn't that what the civil rights was about? Bringing, unifying you. And I'm like, what is really happening? So now that we move past the diversity and we built the foundation, let's talk about equity. Mm-hmm. Equity, a financial term. We don't, and this is another variation between party platforms. In the Democrat Party platform, they talk about equity as creating an equal outcome, right? Which I'm totally against. Because if you don't put in the work, you shouldn't reap the same benefits that I reap.
Whereas the Republicans are saying, let's give everybody an equal playing field to work on. And then whatever level of work ethic they're willing to work to, the sky is the limit to what they can achieve based upon how much work they're willing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, if we give everybody an acre of land and 1 million people don't till their land, they don't plant anything, they shouldn't be able to come over to Joshua's 1,000 acres and say, hey, I need some food from your land because I didn't plant any seeds, so I don't have any harvest. It's not my problem. It's not Joshua's problem.
Right.
You get it, that's a biblical principle as well. Whatever you sow, that's what you'll reap. Mm-hmm. And so that's the equitable principle, is sowing and reaping. And so what are you sowing into the ground? What are you sowing into society? What are you sowing to receive what it is that you're looking to get? If you're not sowing anything, the Bible says a man that doesn't work shouldn't eat. Why do we have so many people that are unwilling to? I'm not saying not able to. We have so many people in America that are unwilling to work because they feel like, well, I can get $200 a month and I can get free housing for not going to work. I'm not willing to settle for $200 a month. $200 a month won't fill up my tank. I probably spend $200 a week in gas traveling across the great state of Texas. And I travel the whole state. And so we have to focus on putting people in a position where they can work to the best of their ability and seeing how it's beneficial for the government to be out of their way so that they can gain wealth. Deuteronomy 26, he said, I've given you, 8:26, he said, I've given you the power to get wealth. Mm-hmm. Everyone has a measure of faith. What do you have the faith to do? And as you work your faith, you realize that wealth comes because of the power that's been bestowed upon you from Almighty God. Mm-hmm. Now, so you've got your diversity, you got your equity, and your inclusion. So now we want to include everybody. We're America first once again. Mm-hmm. It's not our job to include the world. It's our job to include American citizens in the process of Americanism for the benefits of America, not the world.
Yeah.
I'm not for a global market. I'm not for a global economy. I'm for an American society that is thriving, that creates opportunities for me to do any business model that I choose to do. And if my business model fails, I should have chose something different.
Yeah.
People fault Trump all the time, back to Trump, on having so many failed businesses. But you know, if you don't fail, you never can find your model of success.
Yeah.
So I told my kids all while they were growing up, I said, I hope you fail. Because without failure, you don't understand success. Mm-hmm. I hope you fail before you ever achieve the things that you want to achieve. Because all real success is a derivative of somebody's failure. Mm-hmm. So if you don't fail, that's why you have people that they get into the stock market or they're Wall Street people and they kill themselves because they've never seen failure. Mm-hmm. And they make a bunch of money and they lose a bunch of money overnight and they kill themselves. But it's because they didn't have a failure before they got to their place of success. So when I think about the inclusion piece, I don't want anybody that's not a true-blooded, America-loving American to be part of our inclusion. Inclusion is for Americans only. And you shouldn't have to sell me on, and it's amazing because as they teach this, it's teaching the inclusion as America being inherently racist and all of this other stuff. There's no other country that you can go to and have the opportunity and have the wealth and have the fortitude to achieve whatever you want to achieve. You go to other countries, you can't even own property because all the property is owned by the government. Mm-hmm. You go to China, you don't own property in China. You lease it from the government. So many other nations around the world are like that. Mm-hmm. We don't realize that, okay, yeah, I do still have that issue with paying the property taxes for life. However, we got to get some people in there elected to fix that. Mm-hmm. But at least we can actually own the property. or the dwelling that's on the land. But I want to get to where we not only own the dwelling that's on the land, but we also own the land, and all the mineral rights is in the ground, and we're benefiting as a whole. I don't believe a piece of land should be sold where one person can hold your mineral rights unless you want that. Mm-hmm. You should have the option to be able to purchase your own mineral rights on the land that you just purchased without having someone else own your mineral rights. They own what's in the ground while you own what's on the ground. That's insane to me. Mm-hmm. But I believe that the inclusion should be us as Americans only. Mm-hmm. America first, America only, American principles, American values, the American way. Mm-hmm. Fighting for the American dream. Mm-hmm. There's no way around it. You can't convince me of anything other than this is just where I am, because I believe in this country. This country has afforded me the education. This country has afforded me the rights. People talk about, well, what is this, the new thing? Well, we need voting rights. Who can't vote other than illegals? And if you're not a citizen of these United States of America, you shouldn't be voting here anyway.
Yeah.
If you're an illegal, you shouldn't even be here. We need to know everyone that's here. We need to know who you are, where you are, and why you're here. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be some regular accountability. I'm like Trump, deport them all. 100%. Mm-hmm. If we can get them all out, get them out. Secure our southern border. Stop letting people come across our border that are here to do harm to us.
So what would you say to the person that says, I still think that's racist because, if they have to go through the legal, come into the country the legal way, the orderly way, then, Trump said something about need more, what did he say, Swedes or Finns or something like that, and less, or the implication was less of this and more of this.
Right.
Apparently we don't have...
We shouldn't want anybody in our country that's not going to be beneficial to our country. I don't want anybody here that can't add to the value of this great nation. If you're just here, just like you wouldn't want anybody in your home, or your listeners wouldn't want anybody coming into their home just to be takers, mm-hmm. I want you to come in and have something to add, whether it's a skill set, some wisdom, some knowledge. You have a mind to open a business that is something that's needed in society. You're somebody that I welcome here, mm-hmm. the right way. But if you come to just be a taker, because, in my country, we're impoverished. Well, we had this little thing that happened in these United States of America years ago to make us this great nation. It's called the Civil War. And I would recommend that you go back to your country and you start your own civil war and take your country back from the enemies that have taken your wealth and your liberties and your freedoms away from you. And you fight for your country. Don't come to this country waving a flag of another country. Mm-hmm. If you love that country so much, go back and fight for it.
Woo!
Because I'm willing to fight for my America.
Yeah.
I'm willing to fight and shed my blood for my America. Mm-hmm. And if you're so proud of whatever nation you're a derivative of, go back and fight for your nation. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Brazil or whatever nation of the world. Go in, gather your arms, gather your troops, build your army, and fight for your nation. I'm ready to fight for America because I believe in America. Mm-hmm. And America is not going under on my watch. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do all I can to keep America, America.
I'll say, obviously I'm not a fan of Alabama Crimson Tide. I grew up an Auburn fan. But I had such a tremendous amount of respect for Nick Saban and the way that he carried his team. I mean, it was when he went in, for understanding him going in and recruiting a player, it was something like, this is the way that we do things at the University of Alabama.
And that's what we need in America.
This is, when you put on the crimson and white, this is the way we carry ourselves. We graduate our folks, Yes, we want to prepare you for the NFL, but most of you are not going to go to the NFL,
Yes.
and this is how we do it. And if you come here, your son will be required to become a man, and this is how we define it. This is our way. So it's assimilate
Into the
or you're not welcome here.
That's it.
It's if you're recruited to assimilate.
Yes.
Not to bring your way here. Is, hey, you want to come in here. You want to come here.
Yeah, you're asking us.
Right? So you become us, you do it our way, and not that you bring your way and let's change these things and things. Not that we don't have things to improve. But yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because a country that has the perfect model, I believe, of that today is Israel.
Mm-hmm.
As the Jews are coming back from around the world, coming back into their homeland of Israel, they have an immigration process that is amazing to me. Most people don't know this, but I've gone many times to Israel. When you come back into Israel as a Jew from around the world, and you're coming back to your homeland, or maybe a land that you've never really been a part of because the Jews were dispersed all across the world. So now you're coming back in, they provide you housing at no cost to you for your first 3 years. Part of that is job training, teaching you the languages so that you can communicate, teaching you how to work, teaching you the culture so you know how to participate in society and be a vital part of society. And you go through all of that in order to be a part of society. And you only have 3 years. We got people who've been here 20 years and still don't know the language. I met a lady probably 10 years ago. Her and her husband, well, they're not married, but they've been living together 30 years. She spoke no English at all. None. And he spoke broken English. How do you stay in a country that you want to be a part of? Talk about inclusion. If you really wanted to be included, wouldn't you learn the language?
Well, that's heavy. You know, that's heavy. I've never thought of it this way. But what I hear you saying is, you're coming into my house. You should try to conform to my practices. You know, maybe in your house you wear your shoes in the house, but in my house or your house you take them off once you walk in the door. Right. But if you learn that you're coming to my house, we take them off before we walk in the door. Right. You do it my way.
That's it. That's it. And you need to understand the rules.
Instead of me saying, hey, you need to adapt your home to my way of living, is I need to learn how to adapt to your way of living. Is that what you're saying?
So for every nation has its rules. You go to Europe, it's rare. I don't think I've ever saw. So here we have speed limits. In Europe, they have speed minimums. So which means if you're on a certain highway and you're going under 80 kilometers, you can be pulled over for going under the minimum speed you're required to go on that road. Here, our speed limit means you're not to exceed 80 miles per hour or 75 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, depending on where you are. And so what I'm saying is, when you go into a different land, you need to understand the rules of that land, so that if you really want to be included in that land, you need to understand the rules of that land so you can assimilate into the culture of that land.
So what would you say to someone that says, well, this is just whiteness, is what you're talking about is just code for whiteness? When you say American, that's just code for whiteness.
It's code for American. If you're black and you think it's a code for whiteness, you need to find another country too. I'll say it just like that. If you're Asian or Latino or whatever, and you think it's code for whiteness and you're not proud to be an American, you need to find another country too. Because obviously this is not the country for you. Maybe you need to go to Asia. Maybe you need to go to Africa. Maybe you need to go somewhere other than these great United States of America. Because you need to experience something, some real adverse conditions, so that you can understand how well you have it here. You don't understand that our poorest people are the wealthiest in other countries. They're like our poorest people, our homeless living under bridges with, a couple $100 in their pocket to live off on for the month. They are so much wealthier than people when I go to other nations of the world. I've been to Kenya where the homeless people don't even have a bridge to shelter under. And so we talk about the homeless issue. We talk about we got too many wealthy people. Well, if you really want to go on record, everybody in America is wealthy. Mm-hmm. That's why we're hated. Even our homeless are hated in other countries. Kenya, I saw homeless people digging dirt to lay in the dirt to cover themselves, to protect themselves from the rain. You don't have to do that in America. You got shelters, you got bridges, you got all different types of places that they can go. You don't want to go to a shelter because you got drugs and you like to do your drugs, then you go to an overpass or underpass. But you have options. Other places, they have no options. And so I tell people that would deem that to be whiteness and all of this stuff, get out of your racist mentality. When you see something as something other than Americanism, you're the racist. You have to start seeing everything through the lens of your Americanism and the God that you say you serve. Because we're citizens of two kingdoms, the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of this world. Mm-hmm. And as a citizen of the kingdom of this world, our actual citizenship, country citizenship or country of origin is the United States of America. So we need to be seeing things through the lens of America.
So one of the things you're starting to hear, and I predict this is only going to become more prominent as we get closer to November, is this Christian nationalism term. And everyone is not a Christian in this nation.
But everybody in this nation should be a nationalist.
Tell me what you mean by that.
And as a nationalist, that means we put our nation first. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to be an American and say, I'm an American, but I put, we'll just say Dubai first. Mm-hmm. Because if you put Dubai first, you need to go live in Dubai. Because Dubai puts Dubai first.
Yeah.
If you are a Mexico City person and you love Mexico City, which I've been there, love it, nice place, don't want to live there. But if that's what you love so much, then go be that put that first, not here, but put that first as a citizen, as a resident there. Mm-hmm. But as an American, we have a duty to put America first. Mm-hmm. That's on us.
Yeah.
And so whether you're a Christian or not, you need to be a nationalist because this is your nation. This is your nation where people say, well, my forefathers and my parents and grandparents built this and did that and worked hard in this nation. So if your parents and the lineage and the people before you did so much for this nation, why are you not pro this nation? Mm-hmm. Obviously, they were pro this nation enough to be a part of the building process of it. So don't discredit their work by turning aside and looking to another nation.
I think that the argument would be, Troy, that, everyone didn't benefit or have the same opportunity. Some would argue they still don't have the same opportunity. I think that's a harder message to preach. But there's a basis of this Americanism was largely white, and then the opportunity was white for a certain amount of time, and again, many argue still. So, is it fair to say that Americanism is colorblind?
It is, and it should be. The problem is in the hearts of men. We put a color on it. Mm. We make it white, we make it black, we make it whatever we want it to be. But we've got to get past ourselves and realize that we are Americans first and foremost. Mm-hmm. And this is our nation. Mm-hmm. And united we stand, divided we fall. We can't see everything through the lens of color. We can't see everything through the lens of ethnicity. Well, you can, but just know, as long as you see things through the lens of color and ethnicity, you will never have the power to achieve the success that you have, that had the opportunities that have been afforded to you. Why? Because you see yourself as a victim. As long as you see yourself as a victim, you can never achieve victory. You have to get outside of yourself and not see yourself as a victim, but see yourself as a victor. Because we have victory. We got victories in the Supreme Court over the years. You talk about, we got voting rights, we got civil rights legislation, we got all of these different things. The problem is, many of us are so caught in our victim mentality that we can't look past our victimhood to walk in our victory. And in the 21st century, in 2024, it is time for us to look past being a victim and walk in victory. That's what we're called to, whether you're a Christian or not. If you're an American, you live in one of the most victorious societies in the world. Victories all around you. The problem is you're not willing to celebrate the victories.
Yeah, one of the things I think that it's hard for me to be patient with is when people talk about how imperfect America was in the past.
Yeah.
Have you studied anywhere else in the world?
They've only heard what they were told in school.
Every single place in the world.
And this is the question that I tell them. This is the question I ask them. How many imperfect people are in your family?
Yeah.
Do you write them off because of their imperfections?
I'd also say, look at the history of, look at the history of China, look at the history of Ghana, look at the history of France, look at the history of Germany, look at the history
and I used to do
of
that.
South of Africa.
And I changed that model because I found that most people can identify closer with the history of people in their family.
That makes sense.
Than they can with other nations or doing research with other nations around the world.
That's a good point.
But when I make them look at their family and they start analyzing people in their family and they realize that there are no perfect people in their family, but they're all perfect together and they were perfect for each other. Because even the imperfect people, if you came through abuse in your family, if you were abused and misused and mistreated, you know what it is.
I like that. And I would say also, I'd use this point, and you confirming this makes it much more vivid, because I've used this analogy, or I guess metaphor before, of what if you have a parent that, if you're the child of rape.
Right.
And this is a very touchy subject, obviously, but you're the child of rape. So one of your parents, where you came from, is someone who did something horrible,
right,
inexcusable. God can forgive them. It's really hard for us, right? So, is that half of your identity? Does that hold on you for the rest of time, even though your mother was maybe and I'm painting a black and white scenario here. As your mother was a saint and your father was a sinner. Obviously, no one's never that black and white, but in this situation, your mother is zero fault, and I'm not saying the rape is ever anyone's fault, but she's completely innocent of this. Not that she was perfect as a mother. No mother's perfect, but in this situation, she was innocent. And then still half your history is a sin. Is that held over you forever? Or do you look at this and say, hey, my mom had a difficult situation and she was a great person. There was also a bad person that is in my family tree, and I have nothing to do with that man, but this woman I have a relationship with and she's been good to me, and I'm gonna base my identity on how she made something good, me, out of something bad. And it's one of the reasons that I don't know what your feelings are on Juneteenth, but I've always felt positively about the holiday, because to me it felt like that's the day that we officially, it's almost like we're celebrating the grafting in of black folks into what it means to be an American. And that's the way I've thought of it, and I could be wrong. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
So when I think about the coming in and the abuse, the number one thing I tell people, and this is hard for anybody, whether it's abuse or whether it's just neglect or whatever, I tell people you got to let it go.
Yeah.
And you got to let it go, not for the person, but for you.
Yeah.
Because you can't step into your destiny until you let go of that negative past. You can't step into the next level of your positive destiny until you let go of the history of your positive past. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, you've got to let this go so that you can adequately step into that. Mm-hmm. So until we learn how to let that old stuff go, we can never step into the next phase.
It's like a weight that you're carrying.
It is,
and it's a weight that you're carrying,
and you're dwelling on it. It's stressing you out, and it's weighing you down, and you spend all your time and energy focused on it, and so you can never move into the next phase and the next thing because you're so focused on that hurt. Mm-hmm. That you're in a new marriage, mm-hmm. and you're focused on the woman that left you 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Let it go, move on, and love the one that God has given you now.
Yeah.
When you talk about the Juneteenth situation, so I'm not originally from this area, and so it was, as I learned about it, it was perplexing to me, and I can't say that I necessarily celebrate it now.
Sure.
But I understand why the people celebrated because it's just when they found out. And so it wasn't that they were free at that day, that time. It's just that's when they found out that they had been freed 2 years prior.
Right.
That the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed, the deal was set, and it was a done deal. So I understand why they celebrated. But for me, even more so, I celebrate all of America. Mm-hmm. And I don't segregate out or separate out my Americanism. Mm-hmm. I do try to do things, especially at the church, for people here that's their thing and that's what they push and that's what they're supportive of. But for me, I want them to understand that you had this ability, and so I guess a better way for me to put this is, the reason why people found out 2 years later because they were doing everything on horseback and boat.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get any message to anybody.
Yeah.
And so Texas is so big till I'm not surprised it took that long to get the message across Texas and across a lot of the South. So, but I applaud the people for acknowledging that, but now I need them to walk in it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because you're acknowledging that you were free, but then you're speaking out of your mouth that you're not free. You're having a celebration of finding out that you were free, but then you're speaking out of your mouth that you're still bound because you can't do this or that or the other.
Are you, I'm putting words in your mouth here, so I'm going to give you a chance to spin them back out if you know why.
No problem.
I mean, if I'm condensing down some of the things you're saying, it almost feels like you're saying that when you're moving towards this Republican platform and this more of a creative mentality, not the fixed mentality of there's a fixed amount that has to be doled out, then it's a fixed pie and it needs to be more equity in how it's distributed versus let's make a bigger pie and go create your pie. You want more pie, go create it. You don't need to take it more. Is that you've embraced this more that you're calling more of an American mentality, and part of that is saying, hey, I acknowledge that I'm free, that I can control my destiny, that there may be victimhood in the past, but has nothing to do with me now. I have the ability to take control of what I'm doing. And I mean, now is where I'm really putting words in your mouth is, are you saying that on the other side is more of I'm staying in my victimhood, I'm staying in the Democratic side of I'm depending on the government for protection, I'm depending on the government for money, and that keeps me somehow bound?
It does keep you bound because what's happening is now it's keeping you under the thumb of your oppressor because you're voting for and you're supporting and you're celebrating your oppressor. And when I say it's keeping you under the thumb of your oppressor, what I'm saying is that the victim mentality that's being perpetuated and is being sold across the board is all coming from the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that's telling you that you're a victim. They're the ones that's telling you you can't have this and you can't have that and you can't do this and you can't do that. So way I was always raised in my house is, first of all, you never hang out with people to tell you what you can't do. Ooh. Because the only person that can tell you what you can and can't do is you. Mm-hmm. And you can do anything that you're willing to put your mind and your hands to, and so that you can execute it. Yeah. The only reason, my dad used to always tell me, the only reason you can't do something is because you told yourself you can't do it. Right. No one else has the ability to tell you what you can and can't do.
Right.
Because especially today.
And you know, our black heroes from the civil rights era and before were people that were not accepting what they were told they couldn't
exactly
do.
And that should be the model. And that's what, so when I teach through Black History Month and all that, that's what I teach. That's your model for being an overcomer. Is not accepting no for an answer. Not accepting what I can't do. Because the thing about it, if you're focused on what somebody's telling you you can't do, you don't have the ability to focus on what you can do.
Right.
You don't have the ability to strengthen what you can do. You don't have the ability to get better at what you can do.
Right.
You need to make your can-do list and start doing what you can do. And as you do what you can do, you'll find out how much more you can do from your can-do list. The problem that I see in a lot of Black America today is that they're focused on their can't-do list.
Ooh.
I see it tremendously. And a prime example, I talk about LeBron James. Great basketball player, but LeBron is always playing the black card. We can't get up and dude, you're a billionaire from playing basketball.
Yeah.
There's no opportunities in America. Obviously there are. America's holding black people down. You're black and I don't see America holding you down. What America are you living in that's different from the America that all your other brothers and sisters live in?
You see it is funny when you think about a LeBron where it's, you know, the corporate executives that are making decisions to endorse you because he makes way more money on everything, on non-basketball activities than basketball activities. So it's not just that you're an elite athlete and paid very well as an athlete, as an entertainer, but also that corporations throwing money at you. And by the way,
and they don't care about you being black.
All they care about is, do you help them sell their products?
That's it.
So it is, well, they don't care about me. Of course they don't. Of course they don't care. The point is that they don't care that you're black. That's a good thing. Well, they don't care that I'm black. Of course they don't. They care about the money. And if
they see green, you're making them money.
Right. Absolutely, and if you know, Nikola Jokic, I think MVP the last 2 out of the 3 years, a big white dude from Serbia, I think. Yeah. If he was more marketable, he's not interested.
He's just not that marketable.
Not that marketable.
For one, he still hadn't learned English well.
Exactly.
And so if he learns better English, he may become more marketable.
Exactly.
But right now, he's not there.
But there was not a rush to let's go get Nikola Jokic because he's a better player right now than, I mean, LeBron is 40 years old, I think now, and you know, Jokic is probably 28 or something like that. It's a different world. You can argue who's better in their prime. I don't know, but anyway, the point is no one cares.
Right.
And
and that's the point I was making. Nobody cares about the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. They care about the content of your character when you're making the money.
Yeah.
Because if the content of your character ceases to be great, if your character ceases to be a great character, then you hurt the companies that support you as a whole.
You know, I loved athletics. I was an athlete as a kid, and you know, one of the things when I started getting into athletics is my family would ask me about the players themselves, not just about, you know, what does he stand for and what's his family. Just ask me questions, and so it taught me from an early age that I was looking for more than just a great athlete, and so. I've owned two pro jerseys in my life when I was a kid. One was Reggie White, the Minister of Defense, my favorite football player of all time, best defensive lineman of all time, in my humble opinion, and anyone's top 3.
He was.
And then David Robinson in basketball. And I remember someone asking me as a kid, well, is he black? And I was like, it took me a second. I had to think. Well, my parents had never asked me what color he was.
Right.
My parents had asked me about their values, and so I started learning about values. And I read Reggie White's autobiography, and I'm comparing him to other players. And I'm like, I want to be like a Reggie White. He's a fantastic athlete. He's also a minister, and he also values his family. And it was about the values that they had, and is this compatible with the values that this is someone that I should look up to? And I'm not saying either man was perfect, obviously they weren't, but they both had all the values that my family was asking me about, and so they were something that, oh yeah, well that's a good man for you to look up to as an athlete. I know you're gonna look up to an athlete.
Right.
You're a young boy that loves athletics. You're gonna look up to an athlete.
Right.
This is a great one.
No, that's good.
Because of the content of and that's when you think of MLK's great speech is judged by the content of the character.
That's it.
Or in this case, it's capitalism, so the content of your marketability. And the fact that you're so marketable says something about. If you weren't marketable, if you were the greatest player, one of the greatest players to ever live, like LeBron James, but you weren't marketable, that would mean something.
Well, I mean, even when you look at today, looking at a non-LeBron, look at all the people that have become YouTube content creators,
right?
That are making money off of YouTube and Facebook and all these other avenues of social media. Most of those people, you didn't know who they were. Most of the people you still don't know who they are, but they're making money off of this because they found a niche that works for them.
Right.
So if America is so racist, how is it that you're able to get on there? Because I guarantee you, all those people on there that are watching your stuff and being monetized, and the same thing with the people that are doing albums and CDs or whatever they're putting them on now, those people that are making music, especially in the black community, what I've learned, most people in the black community, they want a free CD.
Oh.
They're not supporting the artist.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are supporting the artist are the people that don't look like the artist.
Yeah.
And what I share with artists all the time today is, if America is so racist, why is it that every commercial on television has hip hop music in it? Who's impacting the culture?
Yeah.
Your community is.
Yeah.
And so we can't be too racist that you got Chinese people in video, in commercials, dancing to hip hop music.
Yeah. Well, it's become a situation where you're, I won't use profanity on the show, but deed if you do, deed if you don't. I'll just say, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
It's appropriation.
Yeah.
If you're, I'm a capitalist, not an appropriator. If I'm promoting a soft drink, I want someone that kids like. If I'm hiring a financial advisor, I want someone who can build trust with the people that they're talking to. I don't really care. I care about the bottom line.
There you go.
That's
all that matters.
And when in a capitalist society, the more capitalistic you truly become, and that's really what you are.
Yes.
And it's not usually disguised for something else. Then you become very cognizant of the color of green.
Right, of course. Yeah. And that's a major issue. And I think if we just help people to understand, to actually see, and give them practical examples of people, not necessarily on large television scales, but people in their personal lives. Mm-hmm. And as they see those direct examples, they can see, well, maybe America isn't as racist as I thought it was. Mm-hmm. Maybe the problem is me.
Another thing that comes up is we tend to want to make things into binaries.
We do.
And that is one of the biggest failures, is most things in life aren't binaries. That's one of the things that bothers, that I joke about the left, is everything that shouldn't be a binary is a binary. Right. And everything that should be a binary is suddenly not a binary.
Right.
And this racism is not a binary of does it exist or doesn't exist. There's a difference between saying racism is institutionalized and it is embedded in everything.
And it's not institutionalized, it's in people.
Yes.
And so it is in individual people.
Yes.
It's not in groups. The only institutional racism that I've ever found is the Democratic Party.
Okay.
That's the only institutional racism I've ever found.
Okay.
period.
Troy, we've covered so much on the show today, and it's been such a pleasure to have you today. I want you to leave the audience with something, whether it's something about a community or about thinking about politics, whatever's on your heart at the end of the conversation. What would you leave us with today?
I think all in all, I want people, no matter what ethnicity they are that are listening or watching, I want them to take, the major takeaway is that you're not a victim. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you are. My grandmother said something that I was 40 years old before I figured out what she was saying. And I'll leave them with her saying. Mm-hmm. And it's a little food for thought that'll kind of jog some stuff. She said, you know, if you search for a booger, you'll find one. And so, and what I see for that, for those people that see racism and everything, if you search for racism, you'll find it. Mm-hmm. I've got friends of all nationalities and all ethnicities. I've never experienced what all these people are saying they experience. I'm around the globe. The only place I've ever experienced any type of racism is when I go to Africa. And they're racist against me because I'm an American. Mm-hmm. Whether it's in Kenya, whether it's in Ghana, whether it's in Lagos, Nigeria, Durban, South Africa. And it's always been the ones with darker skin than me that are racist against me because I'm an American. Mm-hmm. And so I want people not to look at being a victim, but start looking at being a victor, mm-hmm. because there's so much victory available for us in American society and American culture, and that we are not a product of our past. We're not a product of our present, mm-hmm. but we are what we make our future will be whatever we make it be. Yeah. But if we stay in the past, all we're going to see is our past reproducing itself over and over again. And the way you overcome your victimhood and your victim mentality is by staying out of the past and focusing on your future.
Amen to that. Again, Troy Jackson, you are the spirit of Untamed Ethos. Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a great time with you.
Awesome.